Many of my viewers kept asking me to play Elden Ring because I guess they wanted me to experience the modern gaming's threshold for difficulty. Naturally, as someone who once S-ranked OG Devil May Cry 3, I decided to take up the challenge. After finishing the game, I can safely say yes. The game is difficult, but in an unbalanced way. If you're an Elden Ring fan or a FromSoft fan, I would love to hear your thoughts on this matter. First, this game's difficulty depends mostly on two things: your character's level and your equipment loadout, more so of your skill. This is something I expected in an RPG, not an action game. And because Elden Ring is an action RPG, this is where the combat can feel a bit unbalanced. I will use my fight with Mikola as an example. Here's my stat and equipment. Do you think I am over leveled? Most of you probably say yes. But if I told you that the reason I leveled up these stats isn't because the game is difficult, would you believe me? Because if you look at my loadout, you'll see a variety of weapons. I like to have options, because depending on the situation or enemy, certain weapons are better than others. However, I cannot fully use a weapon's potential unless I am at a certain level. Like the Great Moonlight Sword requires 38 intelligence, even though I don't use it that much. It just looks cool. Plus, you need a high stamina if you want multiple weapons equipped. In other words, I somehow made the game too easy for wanting to use the many different weapons the game itself provides. Another issue would be the death count. Now, I've seen players that died over 100 times to bosses, hence why people considers the game difficult. Let's look at it from a different perspective. To me, each boss is like a puzzle, and each attack can be avoided with certain timed actions like rolling, jumping, or parrying. However, to know the timing and the correct action to take, you'll need to first see the attack, understand its hitbox, and what action to take. This takes practice, obviously, but because most of these bosses can either 2 to 3 shot you, the death counts are inflated. For example, I'm sure most people died almost immediately when they first faced Mikola, Mesmer, or Melania. Those few deaths are a result of you not knowing their attack, followed by a lot of deaths with you strategizing how to avoid them. And finally, beating the boss because you've got enough muscle memory for the boss's moveset. In other words, some of the difficulty is artificial, because players will get frustrated, not from dying to the boss, but from a very unforgiving sink or swim fight where testing the wrong move will end in immediate death. The last and biggest issue I have would be the lack of scaling. Now, in an RPG, you are most likely not allowed to go into a higher level area because the game doesn't want you to over level. In an action game, it's pretty simple. You are given the option to up the difficulty, thus scaling the game to your level. However, every enemy in Elden Ring has a set level that does not change until you start a new game plus. This is a huge issue for me because Elden Ring is open world, a game design that actively encourages players to explore. So if you explored Caelid first, then you are now in an area where common enemies can one-shot you. However, if you stayed and grinded for XP, then you are now in a position to over-level, making the Stormveil and Lunaria section a chore instead of a challenge. Not to mention there are certain weapons, skills, and equipment that can one-shot bosses, and some of them only require simple exploration rather than beating a boss or completing a quest. Because there's no structure, the game can either feel brain dead easy or unfairly difficult. Because there's no balance, it is up to the player to balance the game themselves. I know some of you will say, well, why don't you just play the game with a naked character with no upgrades if it's so easy? Because it's tedious. Dodging and parrying attacks does take skill, but doing minuscule damage, thus prolonging the fight, is more about attrition, and I don't find that fun. On the other hand, using a cheese build to 3-shot a boss isn't interesting either. So why do I think FromSoft didn't implement scaling? The same reason they didn't add a boss rush or a multiple save file system, maximizing playtime hours. Before you go, let me just say that the best fights I've had are Morgoth, Mesmer, R'hllana, Mikola, Moog, Godric, and other tarnished warriors like Vike and Bernal. Because when I fought them, my character was at an acceptable level with a balanced loadout. I couldn't enjoy Renala, Radon, Rykard, Godfrey, and Radagon because I was a bit over leveled. As for Melania, I really regret using the Mimic to win because I got frustrated for not figuring out her waterfowl. At that time, I did not know that bosses can only be fought once per playthrough. Style-wise, I prefer parrying and a melee build, and I've never used magic and incantations because I was told they were too cheesy. If you are a FromSoft fan or just an Elden Ring fan, I would love to hear what your thoughts are. I stream almost every night, so feel free to come argue with me. I love a great discussion with you.